A lot of comparisons are being drawn to another massive apartment building explosion that happened 6 years ago in 2016. It was also here in Silver Spring. It was the Flower Branch Apartments. 7 people died in that explosion. More than 70 were injured. There was a lawsuit that was settled with Washington Gas as a result of that. It was just a catastrophic scene. I was on that scene as well. I can tell you there are a lot of similarities. The smell in the air, the look in the eyes of the residents who were just staring blankly at the building, wondering what happened. Our Evan Kozlov had a chance to talk to a man who was there, who lived in that apartment complex during the time of that explosion.
In August of 2016, a horrific explosion right here at this apartment complex claimed the lives of 7 people, including 2 children. And it happened right here where this building now sits. They've now rebuilt. But with another incident so similar happening in the same city, just miles away, those painful memories are coming rushing back for some people.
Out of nowhere, there was like this big explosion.
5.5 years have gone by, but Gerardo Orellana still remembers it all.
I saw like a person that was like burnt like really bad from like the side and like the side of the face. So it was like pretty traumatizing.
Collapse, second and third floor.
Now he reflects on another explosion just miles away.
Every time I hear something like that, it just makes me think of this explosion right here.
In December 2020, the Maryland Public Service Commission announced that the likely cause of this explosion was a failure of a mercury service regulator. The commission fined Washington Gas $750,000 as a result, and it also reached a settlement with the families for an undisclosed amount.
I think everybody here had the same first thought: is it another regulator?
Montgomery County Executive Mark Elrich says it's just too soon to say if the latest incident was caused by something similar.
We passed legislation saying that Washington Gas is supposed to get the regulators outside, but I don't want to go there and start by saying this is a regulator because we have no idea. There's just more to find out about this, but it's tragic.
Now Orellana says that one thing that helped him through his trauma was to go to therapy. And for anybody that's struggling after this latest incident, he'd recommend going ahead and doing the same. Reporting here in Silver Spring, this is Evan Kozlov, WUSA 9.
Good morning, I'm Annie Yu.
And I'm Larry Miller. We're continuing our breaking news coverage of that apartment building explosion in Silver Spring.
That's right, Montgomery County fire officials are about to begin a briefing. We're going to take you there live once it starts.
Firefighters have been at that scene for almost 24 hours now, and crews resumed their search of the rubble at sunrise this morning. The explosion happened at the Friendly Garden Apartments. They're on Littonville Road near 16th Street. We know now 14 people transported to the hospital, 2 self-transported, so a bit of an increase from what we saw yesterday. And they're working some theories regarding the explosion. How exactly did this happen? Let's go to Nicole D'Antonio right now. She's at that news conference. Nicole, we got a lot of information about where this investigation stands right now and where it should be moving forward.
Hey, Larry, that's exactly right. Learning a lot about the extent of the injuries. As you said, 14 people injured, 3 with serious injuries. They also explained how everyone was accounted for. Thankfully, no deaths reported yet. And they also explained how it was likely maintenance work that led up to that explosion and that fire. Now, there are a couple things I want to point out that we are out here. Just over my shoulder, you can see fire and rescue crews out here working very tirelessly, going through the rubble. We've seen K-9 units helping them with all of their work. We also have seen that, they've been out here since just about 6:30 this morning. Now, we are set up on the backside of the complex. 3 of the 6 apartment buildings are unable to be occupied moving forward. But we also just learned in that press conference that all of the units in these 6 buildings are without electrical power. So 225 people without a place to stay this morning. I also want to show you just the extent of the power of that explosion, the fire. If you look at the treetops there, you can see the force of that explosion that happened. So those were a couple things I want to point out. You can see the blankets and pieces of the window that are still stuck in the trees there. So fire investigators have a long way to go as they continue to search through the debris here. You heard them say they would likely be out here for the next 3 days or so as they continue to work on all of this. So, Larry, a lot of information that we learned this morning. For now, I'm going to send things back inside to you.
Right now at noon, a miracle. It's been 24 hours since an explosion destroyed an apartment building in Silver Spring. Good to see you. I'm Larry Miller. Today, officials say everyone who lives there made it out alive. They add that at least 14 people were injured, 3 in serious condition, and hundreds without a home after the entire complex was evacuated. Now, this happened at the Friendly Garden Apartments at around 11 a.m. yesterday. An entire building exploded into flames and then collapsed. We're left with a lot of questions, like how did this start? What are investigators learning, and who's responsible? We have team coverage as we work to get you and your family answers. Officials gave an update on the situation earlier this morning. Scott Broom live at the scene for us right now to get us up to speed. Scott?
Well, Larry, we've got utility workers behind us beginning to do a lot of this recovery work. A couple of headlines out of that briefing this morning. You covered them briefly. All residents now accounted for. No one reported missing. No fatalities have been reported, although dogs are still searching wreckage just in case. And there is confirmation this morning, Larry, that a maintenance worker was on site doing a plumbing job when this all happened.
At this hour, dogs are continuing to look for any evidence that people might still be trapped in the rubble. But Montgomery County Fire Rescue Service Chief Scott Goldstein said rescuers are in a much better place this morning.
All known residents of 2405 have been contacted and accounted for. We are still working to confirm that there were no visitors or other people in the building at the time of the explosion that are not part of the residents and part of the 14 apartments in that building.
Goldstein said more people were injured than first thought. The casualty count is now 14. 3 of them remain in serious condition today. Meanwhile, investigators here are now beginning the work of picking through the remnants of the apartment building to figure out what caused the explosion, a process Goldstein said may take 3 days. The chief said the first-hand account of an injured maintenance worker who was doing plumbing is part of the investigation.
One of the components that is being used in an investigative theory is that the work involved with that maintenance individual led to this explosion. That is an investigative theory, along with several others. Until we get through all of the debris and a thorough examination of the building, we cannot rule out any of our active theories and cannot identify that that was the cause of the explosion.
Evidence points to gas fueling the explosion, according to a National Transportation Safety Board official who spoke to WUSA 9 reporter Eric Flack last night. Even so, investigators on site have not ruled out any other possible theories. Authorities said 3 buildings, including the one that's collapsed, are now uninhabitable, displacing a total of 120 people who will need to find someplace else to live.
Another 125 residents who were evacuated last night will be able to return to some of the other buildings here that were not so badly injured once Pepco gets the power back on. They are here working on that, and Washington Gas is a very heavy presence here today as well. Reporting live in Silver Spring, Scott Broom, WUSA 9.
The screams were, the only thing that comes to mind is blood curdling.
If it wasn't the loud boom that shook the community, it was the shrieks for help that had strangers jumping into action.
People were trying to tell me don't go into the burning building. I said, well, you cannot, but I am.
Stephen Inman has a clear shot at the Friendly Gardens apartment complex from his backyard. Once the building adjacent from his home blew up, he ran straight to chaos.
First person I see is a woman screaming that she can't get out. So I yelled at her, just jump out, I got you.
That woman was carrying her baby. Unable to get out herself, the mother had no option but to rely on Inman.
I'm 6'1", so luckily I have long arms. Luckily I was able to stretch far enough to where all she had to do was stretch out, and I was able to grab the infant's legs and then just, and that's it. I passed off the baby to somebody else, ran into the building. Me and a couple other people began to break down that door. She was able to get out.
His heroic gesture didn't stop there. Like others that morning, Inman began banging on every door to get residents to safety.
I broke that window out, picked her up, then I tossed her to my father, who was luckily behind me, and then that's when I ran around because I'm not going to stay still. It was just who's next, who's next, who's next.
Several were injured, and everyone in the building has been accounted for. That's a big relief for this Army veteran who felt guilty for not rescuing an elderly man.
I couldn't breathe. I couldn't see anything. And so I was like, I'm sorry, sir, I have to go. I barely got out myself.